Today's episode of iDubbbz Complains is all about immigration and xenophobia and racism and TikTok and the TikTokification of xenophobia.
So you just know that when you hear that iDubbbz TV is going to do a video on immigration and xenophobia and evil white racism, that we are going to see possibly one of the worst bits of political commentary we're ever going to encounter, and this is what we're going to talk about today. Ian from iDubbbz has decided that he's going to take on the topic of immigration, specifically immigration in Europe, and he has sage commentary and ultimate wisdom like people are just people.
So you would think with all of the traveling around the world, that would really open your mind to different cultures, different ways of life, and how we're all just people trying to live.
And all sorts of empty platitudes and dumb commentary that really go to show us that Ian is fulfilling his arc of being one of the most interesting YouTubers, one of the most hilarious YouTubers in his era, and transitioning into the worst bread tuber. Again, you can get this kind of crappy lefty commentary from absolutely anyone. Ian is particularly bad at it, yet he is going to step into the fray, stand up for what he believes in, and he's gonna do this all because he has decided to align himself with the worst of the worst among left-wing idiots. And this video is unbelievably stupid, unbelievably worthless, and of course, unbelievably hypocritical in every aspect. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
But unfortunately, he's a great example of how you can travel the world, and as long as your mind is closed, everything you see is just going to confirm your biases.
So Ian, aka iDubbbz TV, once one of the most successful YouTubers on the internet.com, is actually doing this video from his wife's mother's basement, and his set looks everything like that's exactly where he's broadcasting from, and he's angry at a guy who happens to be a white South African, and let me emphasize white South African because that will come into play a little bit later throughout the course of this video, who has traveled the world, is making commentary based on what he's seen throughout the course of his world travels. And by the way, he's not just been to European nations and first world countries, he has gone to different various third world countries. And one of the things that this guy appears to like to do, again, I'm not all that familiar with them, is compare different sections of European towns and cities to those third world countries to talk about the third worldification of different areas in Europe. And this has really aggravated Ian because, again, platitudes like people are just people. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this platitude, but people are just people.
Look at this. Look at the fucking state of the city. This is Rome, guys.
Like the Casbah.
This looks like in Bangladesh or something. Look at this, guys.
What do you mean, or something? I would like to hear more, but you're just saying it looks like Bangladesh. Is that because there's people from Bangladesh here?
So this TikTok vlogger who has angered Ian so much ends up going to a market in Rome, which is the capital of Italy, for those of you who are unaware, and he starts talking about how this market, which is known for supplying certain foreign goods to people who are from nations like Bangladesh, and he says that this reminds him of Bangladesh. And Ian goes on this whole rant about, what do you mean it looks like Bangladesh? What are you trying to say? I don't get it. Why don't you explain it a little bit further?
Or are you just assuming where people are from? There's a lot of people with brown skin in the world, and they don't all come from Bangladesh. I don't know, do they have fresh fruit and vegetables in Bangladesh? I mean, that's one indication it might look like Bangladesh.
iDubbbz, what he's trying to say is that in this video, which is a visual medium, you can see the similarities visually between this place and Bangladesh. And again, your stupid rant about how there's lots of brown-skinned people all over the world, and not all of them come from Bangladesh, is completely worthless commentary. It adds nothing to the conversation. It's absolutely useless, and genuinely, it does not make a difference at all whatsoever whether these people are from Bangladesh or Pakistan. The point he's trying to make is that this resembles a third world market that you would not normally traditionally find in the nation of Italy, let alone in the capital of Rome. That is the point that he's trying to make. I need to make that 100% clear because you're a dumb idiot throughout the course of this video, but that is what is is being said right here. And by the way, the people that are here, the non-Italian ethnic groups that are present at this market, are part of what makes this look like not Italy.
I've seen this guy's videos, by the way. He goes to Bangladesh.
Okay, thank you. Right. Wow, it is madness.
He's gone to a random farmer's market where the population of immigrants is a bit higher than other places in the city. And he's saying, yep, we're in Bangladesh.
Part of iDubbbz's new arc as the worst bread tuber absolutely ever is disproving his own points within his own videos right after he makes it. So he's like, this guy, what is he trying to say that this looks like Bangladesh? And then after he goes on this whole rant about how not all browns are from Bangladesh, again, an argument that was never made at any point at all whatsoever, he says that this guy actually visited Bangladesh and then shows footage of him, and guess what? The footage looks remarkably similar. So visually, we now understand what this person is saying. And then he's like, oh, well, what's going on? He went to a place where there's a lot of immigrants and then made commentary about the immigrants there. And I don't like that because I'm uncomfortable with being a white person myself. I'm a white guilted coward. Therefore, I have to simp for these immigrants in a nation that I'm not even from and I may not have ever even been to because, you know, immigrants good, me like immigrants.
Look at the state of this place.
You mind telling us what the state is?
Look at the fucking state of the city. Look at the state of this place. Look at this, guys. Look at this.
But I don't know what the state is. I need you, the vlogger, to tell me what the state is.
Look at this, guys. This is Rome. This is Europe. Does this look like Europe to you?
So a huge part of this video is playing dumb, pretending that you don't understand what he's saying, where he's like, look at the state of this place, and he's like, oh, I need that explained to me. He's quite literally showing it to you. It looks like a more dirty than typical market for a European nation, something that is similar to what you might see in a nation like Bangladesh. This is the most simple, obvious thing. He also shows the graffiti on the outside on all of these buildings in and around this area. This is what he's trying to highlight right here. And Ian's like, I don't know. You gotta explain it to me. Say something kind of racist so I can cry and call you a racist.
Yes, it looks like Europe to me. What the else are we supposed to gather from this video? It's like this guy, this is so obnoxious. A lot of these guys that we're going to look at, they have an idea in their head of what European culture is. Their idea of these things is like a caricature. It is like a postcard. It is not like what they're actually experiencing on a daily basis.
So iDubbbz says, oh, people just have an unrealistic vision of Europe from postcards and whatnot. And again, never throughout the course of this segment does iDubbbz say, I've been to this area, I've been to Rome, I've been to these locations, so I have a better idea of what Europe actually is than, of course, these people who are just going to these places and highlighting all the foreign-y stuff, again, foreign to European populations. But I'll tell you, as somebody who has been to Rome, as somebody who has been to a bunch of different European cities, one of the things that you will notice is that places like Rome tend to have higher than typical immigrant populations, less Italian people in proportion to other places, although I did look up the data on this, and one of the things that I found out is that Sicily, somewhere that I have not personally been, apparently has a higher immigrant population than even in Rome. So yeah, what you see in a lot of these places is non-Italian peoples, and this market, if you compare it to the market that is famous and opened in the 1800s in a place like Florence, looks completely different. This looks like a European market, something that you would expect to see in the central area of any major city in a European nation, or specifically in Italy, and this looks like something you would see in Bangladesh, according to the guy who has been to Bangladesh. Again, I haven't actually been myself, so I can't actually confirm this, but this is what he's trying to say. This is what he's trying to communicate. And then, of course, we get into the Italian peoples.
What are these people doing on a regular basis? Selling and buying a bunch of produce in a market. And he's saying, this isn't Europe. I'm not seeing any white cheese vendors. This is nothing like Europe. This is nothing like Rome.
I don't see a single Italian here, guys. I am more Italian than any of these people. Look at this.
I don't see a single Italian here.
I don't see a single Italian here, guys. I am more Italian than any of these people.
Okay, dude. What fuck are they? What the fuck are these people living in Italy? What does an Italian look like? You don't see an Italian? What are they going to wear, a name tag? Yeah, my name's Riccardo, the Italian.
So this travel vlogger guy points out that in this immigrant market area, he doesn't see a single person that is an Italian. And iDubbbz goes on this whole rant of what does an Italian look like? Do they wear a name tag on their chest that says that they're Italian? As if we don't know what Italian ethnic peoples look like. As if Italy isn't a nation that combines a bunch of people that fall under the broad banner of Italian based on ethnicity and or culture, and they don't have a distinct look. Again, as somebody who has been to Europe, as somebody who has been to Italy, you can actually go to museums, you can go to historic sites, and what you'll see are depictions of Italian peoples depending on the era, and I'm gonna put some of them up on screen for you, and you tell me that these historical depictions of Italians don't look identical to Italian peoples from the Italian ethnic group that iDubbbz is pretending does not exist right here. Again, these people are not Italian. I mean, it's fine if they want to allow immigrants into their country. That is 100% on them.
Maybe instead of saying, I don't see any Italians here, you can ask any of these people who are most certainly Italian, ask them if they're Italian.
But the funny thing about this is that while iDubbbz is criticizing this person for not having a worldly view, he is putting on an American ideal of this idea that you actually become an American over time on all of these people who showed up last week in this particular country. Most of these people, by the way, if you ask them, would not identify as Italian because they are not ethnically nor culturally Italian. They would identify as a part of their own ethnic group, but here we have iDubbbz playing dumb saying what even is an Italian. He flashes Super Mario, Wario, and of course Yoshi on screen, which again are Japanese depictions of some Italians. One of them is a dinosaur, you absolute idiot. And then he's like, oh, what even is an Italian? Why don't you try to explain this to me? How about none of these people even look vaguely European? And by the way, Europeans typically, I know this is going to be shocking to iDubbbz, are white. Italian people are not only white typically, but they also have the look of Italian peoples that you can trace back to sculptures and all sorts of things throughout their long history as a civilization that predates Italy itself. Again, ancient Roman art that depicts Italian peoples, or Romans back in the day, as they were called, look like the people that are in Italy, the ones that have been in Italy for generations, because they're the same people. There's a history, there's a heritage there. Do you understand that? And by the way, iDubbbz is pretending like he doesn't right here, but make no mistake about it, he absolutely does understand that, and he makes delineations that show his hypocrisy throughout the course of this video.
And ask any of these people who are most certainly Italian, ask them if they're Italian.
They're not Italian, and it's honestly pathetic that you end up pulling up a screenshot of people that are clearly and obviously not Italian and saying, oh, just ask them, they're definitely Italian. No, absolutely not.
By the way, guys, his clothing brand is called Conquest. He's a white South African making travel vlogs that are vaguely xenophobic. And his clothing brand is called Conquest. We gotta retire one of those things at least. I would recommend the xenophobic part, but you could also change the conquest part as well. You know, at least one.
So look, I don't know clothing labels or anything of the sort, so it could be true that his strap is actually from a brand called Conquest, but it also could be that he has the word Conquest on him because he's talking about these people who he views as invaders to the continent of Europe, and he's talking about them conquering Europe. But also, I want you guys to listen to how iDubbbz describes him. I'm gonna play it one more time.
He's a white South African. He's a white South African. White South African.
Yeah, notice how he doesn't just call this man an African. He calls him a white South African. He specifically delineates him from Africans by his skin tone, by his ethnic origin, even though white South Africans have been in South Africa for something like 500 years. Again, how long does it take for you to be in a location, establish a society, have citizenship there? How many generations generations do you have to go back before you're considered indigenous? For these people in the market, they're Italians even if they arrived here 10 minutes ago and they don't consider themselves Italians. But this guy, even though his family, if he's a white South African, could have been in South Africa for as long as 500 years, he's a white South African. He is distinct from the Africans, and that distinction is made based on the fact that he's white person right here, white South African, and iDubbbz wants you to understand that he has a problem with that. In fact, him calling him a white South African is a substitute for an argument throughout the course of this, because he's like, oh, that's bad. White South African, a white person living in Africa. But iDubbbz, if you have a shared standard, if you actually have a position that you can defend that is consistent, why aren't you just referring to him as an African? Why aren't you just saying, well, his family has been there for 500 years. I mean, those people from Bangladesh that got here 8 minutes ago, they're definitely Italian, but for some reason, you're making the delineation between him and other Africans based on his skin tone. It's almost as if you completely understand what he's saying. It's almost as if you completely get the concept of separating people out based on racial or ethnic origin, because that often speaks to cultural separation, but you don't grant those same rights and privileges to white people that you grant to non-whites, because you think that's just not fair that white people could ever be considered indigenous to a certain location. Again, he has no concept at all whatsoever of what an Italian person looks like, even though you have thousands of years of civilization of Italian peoples unifying to form this current country that is Italy right now in this very moment. And, you know, he can't tell the difference between a Bangladeshi and an Italian, but a white South African, 500 years in South Africa, white guy, white person, bad person because he's white.
Saying that the streets is dangerous.
No, sono pericolosi.
Perché?
Perché hanno i coltelli tutti quanti, i maceti. Con
Machetes?
Sì, loro.
Look at all these guys. Look at all the shit on the floor. And here they are, just loitering. Very dangerous, he's saying.
Se passo là io adesso, sono un centinaio, mi caricano, sicuro.
So the South African guy, I mean white South African guy, ends up talking to an Italian local, and he explains that in and around this area is very dangerous because there's knife crime and machete crime, and by the way, that crime is coming from immigrants. Those are the people who are committing those crimes. We have seen this pattern throughout the course of Europe, and iDubbbz is very angry about this. In fact, he says this is propaganda that you've been primed for, so he's trying to say it's not happening, but of course, he ends up saying that it is happening later on.
Sicuro.
So this is the part of the video where they really up the levels of propaganda. They start you off softly implying by just showing you like, this isn't like the postcards of Europe that you see. You guys have heard of Rome in your history class. You never saw pictures like this. You saw beautiful things like the Colosseum, but now you have to see immigrants. And then you get to this guy who's like, all right, now that I've primed you, I'm going to tell you how dangerous this street is that's adjacent to the farmer's market. Never mind the fact that none of you have any idea what this market is, what this street is. He's just going to act like he's an authority on the matter.
So right there, we hear that it's propaganda. We hear that you've been primed for this. He doesn't really provide commentary on the specific things that the local person says, but he just says it's propaganda.
He's an authority on the matter and vaguely imply that it's an immigrant problem and not a poverty problem.
And then suddenly we get that little switch up right there where the thing that he just said was propaganda and not happening is happening because these people are poor. And it's not the fact that they're immigrants, it's the fact that they're poor. And again, if you're crafting immigration policy in a nation like Italy, and you have these people coming from poor countries to Italy, and they're going to commit crimes because they're poor, this would be a perfect reason to not let these people in. Spoiler alert, I don't give a damn how much money you have. When you start hacking up people with machetes, I don't want you in our country. And again, this is just the amalgamation of stupid leftist talking points crushing him at the same time, because he has to deny the crime that happens. You can't say immigrants are committing crimes, even though the numbers absolutely bear that out all across Europe. But also, in addition to that, you need to blame poverty, because you have to say arrest poverty, because everything is based on material conditions. And if only we had a description of poverty, we could arrest them and solve the crime problem in Italy that's coming from these immigrants. But don't worry, it's only because they're poor. So maybe we should stop letting in so many poor immigrants to commit crimes in the nation of Italy.
By the way, when I was editing this, I found the rest of this clip. He ends up leaving the marketplace and they go to some random public area and harass some people who are just minding their own business, talking about how he's from Europe and he's more Italian than these people. I think he mentions Africa at one point.
So iDubbbz plays this video. Of course, he's talking over the audio and he says that they're in a random public place. iDubbbz, just so you know, that is called a park. And by the way, if you've ever been to a park that looks like this, that is in this state of disrepair, one of the things that you can expect there is crime and drug use and all sorts of other problems. But I like the fact that iDubbbz's narration says that they're harassing a random guy when on the video that you're seeing, you know, that is not being explained enough to you, according to iDubbbz, you can clearly see the guy of African descent march his ass over to these people that are filming, again, which is weird when they're the ones supposedly harassing him.
We're in Italy. We are in Europe. We are not in Africa. Get away from me. Okay. This is my country. Yeah, Europe.
Now look, this is supposed to be a comedy video, and that's the comedy right there. Now, of course, iDubbbz is going to read comments, and he's not really going to add anything to these comments, except for a goofy voice every now and again.
Oh no, Europe is being overrun. Someone save Europe. Now, these videos themselves are very bad, but when you go into the comment section, you realize how many people these bad ideas are attracting. Samantha says, import third world, get third world. Well, these are not imports. These are human beings, but if you're referring to, you know, there being a farmer's market, that's kind of a first world thing. That's just called a regular market everywhere else.
Wow, iDubbbz, what great commentary. These people are not imports, they're actually human beings. They're human beings, just so you know. These people are human beings. Now, I will just point out that you can totally import human beings into a place. You can also export people into a place. Everybody understands what that commenter was saying, but also iDubbbz is referring to this market, which is just a market, a third world style market, something that caters to immigrants, as a farmer's market. And he's like, those are very popular in the first world. Farmer's market, when again, I will point out that what farmer's market have you ever been to that looks like this? In fact, farmer's markets in the United States of America, let's be 100% honest, are very disproportionately white in customer base. This is the thing that wealthy white liberals like iDubbbz end up going to, and the idea that he's saying that that is identical to what you would see as a farmer's market is absurd. And then he's saying, oh, this is just like a regular market in the first world, when again, show me a supermarket that looks like that is not also run by immigrants.
This is what the liberals want in America. Yeah, and they're getting it. They're getting their farmers markets and they're loving their farmers markets. Thank you for making this content and hopefully waking up the European people. Oh yeah, this is something that you're going to see a lot, is people just sort of, when it benefits them, they will invoke the continent of Europe, and when it doesn't benefit them, they'll be very specific and say, oh, this is a real problem in the UK. This is a real problem in Rome.
This is the most worthless commentary I've ever seen in my entire life. Sometimes problems have to do with Europe as a whole, and sometimes problems are country specific, because guess what? A lot of these countries are in something called the European Union, and let's say you're a nation like Germany and you allow a bunch of people to immigrate to your country, and then you give them European passports. They then have the ability to live and work in any place throughout the course of the European Union. So you might talk about Germany's open border policies, and then you might talk about how it impacts Europe. Again, this is like if I talked about problems in crime with New York City or with Chicago or with California, but then I also talked about national issues and how national policy can sometimes have an impact on that. And iDubbbz would say, well, I noticed that you're doing this trick where sometimes when the problem is specific to California, you'll talk about California specifically, but if the problem is specific to the United States of America, you know, the country as a whole, you pivot hypocritically somehow to talking about the nation. Again, this is a non-point. There are European policies that impact Europe as a whole, and then there are specific policies to specific nations that also cause problems and anger and resentment and whatnot in those specific countries. Like, this is not a hard concept for you to understand, but the thing is, iDubbbz doesn't know anything about this. Again, he is the worst bread tuber.
Europe is finished. Rome has fallen. Again. Oh man. Yeah, farmers markets will be the end of Rome. This is what America would be if Trump didn't put a stop to it. Yeah, and how's that working out?
Again, he's just reading comments and adding no commentary. Occasionally he'll splice in an accent, and then he cuts together people who have been detained by Border Patrol or by ICE, and he's like, how's that working out? Well, a lot of people are satisfied the most with Trump's immigration policy out of all of his other policies, so I guess it's working out quite well. People are getting what they wanted. They didn't want people surging to the border like they did under Joe Biden's direction, which is what he campaigned on when he ran for president in 2020.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
And now migration to the southern border has stopped almost completely, so it's working out quite well, quite swimmingly, Ian, if you're curious.
Import third world, become third world. I don't like. I just came back from Rome, and yes, it was bad. Scammers and graffiti everywhere. I'm not even Italian, and it makes me sad. Well, don't let your racism affect you too much. For all you know, the Italians are loving it.
Again, he's adding almost nothing to the comments that he's reading, and what's hilarious about that is he says, for all you know, the Italians are loving their farmers markets, when in reality, we know the opposite is true. Remember, they voted in Meloni, the most anti-immigrant candidate that they could possibly vote for, because they're absolutely not loving it. Italians want Italy to be for Italians. I know this is a shocking concept to Ian over there at iDubbbz, but yeah, they're not into it. They're not interested in it. This is why it is a documented phenomenon. People don't like a bunch of people that don't assimilate to their culture, that don't care about their culture, that are committing higher rates of violent crime coming into their country. Typically, they happen to be against that.
This looks like Toronto as well. Unfortunately, same in the UK, even worse. RIP Europe and UK. They're ruining Canada and the UK right now. Oh my god, we finally found a sensible comment. Every city, state, country has its international sections, i.e. Chinatown, Japantown, Little Armenia, etc. There's nothing wrong with diversity. You happen to be in an international flea market. This is Rome is a false statement. It's just a block, not the state of the city. Okay, shout out Jack, the man. You just brought the heat.
So a couple of things are hilarious about this. First and foremost, for some reason, and I just noticed this, iDubbbz is blurring out the names of every comment that he's reading, but then half the time he's mentioning the names and not editing it out. So that's just completely pointless. And second, the only good counter argument at all whatsoever to this individual that iDubbbz is responding to comes from this comment where he's saying, hey, this could be an example of like a Chinatown or a Japantown or some kind of ethnic specific neighborhood that is not necessarily representative of what's happening all over the country. And again, this doesn't come from Ian. This doesn't come from iDubbbz. This guy makes a 20-minute video, doesn't add anything except for hypocrisy and absurdity where he says, oh, these people are definitely Italian. They're 100% Italian, even though they're clearly not Italian. And then he reads a comment where somebody saying, yeah, they're not Italian, but this is like the ethnic town or the ethnic section of Rome, not the whole city, which, by the way, could be true. That could be a good argument. If iDubbbz made this argument throughout the course of his video, rather than saying, oh, I can't tell the difference between a Bangladeshi and an Italian, but also this guy who has family that dates back to Africa for at least 500 years, he's a white guy from Africa, he's not a regular African, then we would actually have something to talk about, an interesting discussion, an interesting conversation, but iDubbbz is totally incapable of that.
They turn every place they go into the place that they left. I think some people have a selfish mindset in thinking that because they themselves wouldn't leave the country that they were born in or have become accustomed to, that other people wouldn't do that. And if they are doing that, they're doing it for like sinister reasons.
So it's hilarious that iDubbbz calls this a selfish mindset when what we're seeing right here on display is a selfish mindset from him. iDubbbz obviously does not care about where he comes from. He doesn't care about his country. He doesn't care about the opinions of the people within his country. Again, this is a guy who let his wife talk him into dumping his last name because his wife was disgusted by how white his last name was.
Not that it matters, but the only reason why we chose my name over his last name is because his last name is like just objectively ugly. It's just like an ugly last name. Like Washburn sounds horrendous. Like Anissa Washburn definitely stormed the Capitol. That's how that went. But like I feel like, I don't know. That's like, to me, Anissa Washburn sounds bad.
So iDubbbz, who has no connection to his heritage, to his family, no respect for his family name, is like, oh, why do you even care if Italy stays Italy? Why would that even bother you if you're an Italian person? He doesn't leave this up to the Italian people, who, by the way, voted in a way that indicates that they're not okay with immigrants or they want less immigration. He just projects his own morality onto them, which is let all these people run over you and erase your culture, because that's what he did in his personal life. Also, he's about to contradict himself yet again.
It's just like a basic human thought to be like, I want to bring some of my culture into the place that I'm traveling to, that I'm now going to start my new life in. And of course, it's going to be these places that are desirable to go to and that are very multicultural. There's a reason why people are referencing Canada and the UK. It's because people who are immigrating to these countries like these countries. They like that their culture is either already kind of established there, and there are foods and routines and places to go and people to meet that are going to allow them to integrate better into the society.
So iDubbbz is trying to make the case that people are coming here to assimilate, but they're specifically going to places and bringing their own culture, or going to places that already have their own culture so they don't assimilate. Again, this guy's an absolute idiot. This guy is stupid in every possible way, and it's embarrassing to watch him try to construct these arguments and then knock himself down with his very next sentence. And again, this comes from two places. First and foremost, it comes from the idea that iDubbbz doesn't value anything about his family, about his heritage, so he doesn't think anybody else should, if they're white, by the way. If they're minorities and you go into a minority area, even if you went in there with your family 500 years ago, he has a major problem with you, and he has to delineate white South African from Africans, even though, again, 500 years of history, but minority that arrived last week, just as Italian as you, just as American as you, just as Canadian as you. But at the same time, it also comes from a place of absolute ignorance about European culture, what it means to be a European, what it means to be an Italian or Irishman or somebody from Germany or something of the sort, based on this idea that we have in the United States of America of becoming an American. Again, this is a concept that is much more difficult conceptually in places like Europe, and iDubbbz just does not understand this. And I'll give you an example of this that should make this simpler. So half my family is Irish. That's why I have an Irish first name and an Irish last name. And I recently went to Ireland. It was the first time I was ever there, and while I had a great time and I loved the people there, and the food was absolutely amazing, by the way, you know what I didn't feel like the entire time that I was in Ireland? Irish. Because guess what? I'm not. My family came generations ago. They Americanized, raised me as an American, and being an American is different from being an Irishman. And by the way, despite the ethnic ties that my family, or at least half of them, has to Ireland, that is just a fact. So we are distinct, separate people, again, even if we share a common ethnic origin, because being an American or becoming Americanized actually means something. It has an impact on you, and it separates you out from these other cultures. Now imagine if you're not even the same ethnic group, if you're not even from the same continent, if you don't value any of the same traditions, food, language, all those other things that would make you a part of that group, and then somebody says, well, because you're brown and I don't want to have standards for minorities, you're just as Irish as the people who have been there for hundreds of years. It's absurd. And by the way, again, if you explain this in a way that didn't involve white people at all, people would 100% understand this. Black Americans are Americans. They're something distinct and different from Africans. You can't have black people just go back to Africa and integrate no problem because they have been so Americanized over the course of them being here for centuries that they are distinctly different. In fact, this was so well understood in the 1800s that we actually set up a nation called Liberia for Africans who didn't want to live in America, wanted to return to Africa, but knew that they wouldn't integrate into African culture for the long period of time that they were in the United States of America. This is a concept that everybody has understood for centuries all across the world, except for woke progressives who understand it when it applies to white ethnic groups that they don't like, but suddenly forget it when it involves people that they consider to be oppressed ethnic minorities. So yeah, iDubbbz, you're pathetic, your arguments are stupid, and I think it is only fair for us to examine your comment section to see how people are responding to you, since you think that is a substitute for having an argument. Again, top comment when I looked: funny listening to somebody who isn't from Europe telling everyone what Europe is like. Then you have pay your coaches the money you owe them. What kind of humiliation ritual is this? And then somebody says, quote, they live in Italy, they are Italians, close quote, and it says, if I move to China, does that make me Chinese? Then you have somebody saying, bro is quite literally lobotomized. Somebody follows that up by saying, congrats on 6 million subs, been here since 7 million. Somebody's making fun of him for staying in an area of Canada that is 94% white. What makes it extra funny that he says all this stuff while he's in one of the whiter areas of Canada is that I grew up in New York City. I grew up in one of the most immigrant heavy places in the entire world. I have friends that are immigrants, again, from Korea, from China, from Latin America, because that's the neighborhood that I grew up in. I know a bunch of different people that came here from India, and I absolutely love the positives of immigration in my country and how it's impacted my life, because the thing is, a lot of immigrants, when they come to the United States of America, come because they do love America and they want to become Americans. But that doesn't mean, because I've had positive experiences, that we shouldn't have a border. That doesn't mean that Italians or being Italian doesn't mean anything, or being Irish, or again, being English, being German, French, a Spaniard, or anything of the sort. But iDubbbz, who of course isolates himself from the scary minorities because it's all projection, ends up saying, oh, well, none of that means anything. You whites should just let all the browns. I don't know if you guys know this, but not all browns are from Bangladesh, because he thinks he's providing actual value when he doesn't actually integrate with these people. He doesn't actually hang out with these people. He doesn't spend time with them. He doesn't enjoy the things that they do bring that are positives from various parts of the world, because again, this is all performative. It's all nonsense. And again, almost all of these comments are absolutely ripping this man to shreds. And one of my favorite comments that I wasn't able to find during the recording of this video, but I'll try to find it in editing, is one that starts with somebody saying, I'm from Bangladesh, and I thought that that market was in Bangladesh when this video started. So again, iDubbbz, just stop. Just quit. Give up. Retire. You're going downhill extraordinarily fast. Your views are cutting down like crazy. And guess what? We don't need another crappy bread tuber. You are the worst at it. You're absolutely terrible. And by the way, I'm sparing my audience the second half of your video where you complain about a Scottish guy playing bagpipes around the world, because of course that bothers you for some reason. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about iDubbbz being an absolute idiot. Till next time.